We'll see you Saturday at 6 p.m. until 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Studio B, Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
I went through this stage when I was quote unquote waking up about 4 years ago, where I just couldn't find words to tell people about the fact that everything was a lie.
Yeah. It's like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the old one.
Then he is your Uncle Ira.
But he isn't. There's something missing.
Right.
Where suddenly you realize that your friend has a pod under his bed.
They're like huge seed pods. But when they're finished, what happens to our bodies?
You know, and you don't know exactly what to do about it. And you're afraid if you fall asleep. I mean, I just happened today to pick up a book called Off the Grid that this guy wrote, who I met in Mexico in 2009. And I bring this up because he interviewed me and I interviewed him, and I filmed our interview, and it had to do with 9/11. I talked to him about Building 7, but what my point was simply that this was a pundit in England who writes books and makes award-winning documentaries that is in the delusional state. It was just another example.
You're talking about Building 7, right? That's the one that they announced had fallen before it fell, right?
Right, yeah.
That was on BBC.
As you can see behind me,
we can see behind Jane, and we see that Building 7 is still standing. Of course, Building 7 does drop straight down into its own footprint in freefall time, just like a standard controlled demolition. But this happens 20 minutes later.
Yeah, it disintegrated from two fires.
Yeah. So, and you met a guy in Mexico that was...
He had made a documentary.
I made a documentary a couple of years later.
He's a well-known British writer. Nick Rosen is his name.
Immediately afterwards, people were phoning me up and interviewing me about what I thought about 9/11. You know.
Really?
Yeah,
immediately afterwards?
Yeah, well, within 24 hours I was giving interviews.
Why?
I don't know.
Why you?
Because I'm a kind of pundit.
And he had made a documentary about the rebuilding. And when I met him, I was stoked because here's a guy that had interviewed Larry Silverstein, the guy who owned the whole complex, right?
Right.
Who had to have been in on it, right?
And it interviewed all the key players. So it interviewed Silverstein.
Okay. And he's the guy who said, we're going to pull it and watch the building go down. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
Sure.
Silverstein.
Yeah.
You know that whole story, right?
And I said, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull. And then we watched the building collapse.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I'm filming. I'm talking to this guy, Nick Rosen, who had interviewed this guy. Rosen said, I know everything about Building 7. Everything.
I kind of know all about 7. I know all about everything to do. I know every little last detail about all of that.
And I said, well, did you ask Silverstein what he meant by pull it? And he had no idea what I was talking about. So I explained to him about the pull it thing. And I explained to him that if Building 7 was a controlled demolition, and then he stopped me and he said, yeah, it was a controlled demolition.
Well, I think that's correct, yeah.
You think it is correct?
Yeah.
That it came down from a controlled demolition?
Yeah.
And I said, what? And he said, Silverstein told me it was a controlled demolition.
Silverstein told me that they'd had to demolish it.
And my hair on the back of my neck stood up. Here's a guy who had no clue about 9/11. He's as mainstream as you go.
Pull it is a demolition term for bringing a building down.
Yeah.
And that's what he said. Pull it, and we watched it come down.
Yeah, I thought he told me that. Yeah.
So he knew it was.
You're in agreement that it's a controlled demolition. You're just not so sure. I don't know which one. Oh, here it is. You're just not so sure, like who was responsible and why, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the fact that the U.S. government denies that it was a controlled demolition, right there.
World Trade Center 7 collapsed because of fires.
Somebody that's going to cover up the truth, usually they're involved in the crime. Wouldn't you? Isn't that a safe bet?
It's because of fires.
Let's see if here he goes. Here we go.
Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it.
And I couldn't persuade him that meant something really important.
What does that mean to you in terms of who was behind 9/11? Does it mean anything?
Not in itself, no. Not in
How long
itself.
does it take to set up a controlled demolition? Do you have any idea?
So this guy could never make the connection that if you're going to do a controlled demolition on a building, that it's going to take 2 or 3 weeks or whatever. It's going to take, you can't just go out and say, okay, let's pull the building.
That's what he thought.
He couldn't make that connection because of the mind control aspect of this.
Right.
Because he couldn't.
It also made no sense, though, Mark. It made no sense. Why would they bring the building down just because it had 2 fires in it? Even if they could do it, why would they do it? There were you look into it. It had 2 or it had maybe 3 fires on 3 different floors. This is a building with a footprint the size of a football field, 600 feet tall, and they're going to blow it up because it has 3 fires in it. And I tried to explain that to him, that made no sense anyway.
I'm just sort of astounded that, based upon your interviews and all the experience you had in the aftermath, that you say, yeah, it was a controlled demolition. Because I'll tell you, if it was a controlled demolition, the implication is directly that it was an inside job. I mean, trust me, they couldn't have done it in 6 hours. They couldn't have, they couldn't have. Why would they do it? I mean, it's almost impossible for me to use logic because it's so illogical that they would suddenly go after these buildings are coming down. Quick, let's go rig that building to come down in its own footprint. I mean, it doesn't make any sense, does it?
Well, it does. It makes sense if they were trying to preserve the buildings next to it.
Well, all the buildings were destroyed next to it.
And I said to them, what are you talking about? It's impossible. Why would they do it? It made no sense at all. And I emailed him for 6 months after he left Mexico, because he said he would check with his contacts to find out if you could set a building up in a few hours for a controlled demolition.
Building 7 is a controlled demolition equals inside job. I'm going to let you think on that. And you have to really just sort of go, could they get, I mean, it's just inconceivable that they'd get guys in there and do it in less than, it doesn't matter. It's impossible that they could do it in an innocent way. It was set up way ahead of time.
That I can find out about in no trouble at all.
Please do.
Because I have a very good friend who became a friend during the filming.
Right.
Who was hired to put wind turbines on top of the new tower once it was built.
Uh-huh.
So he's a structural engineer. And he's privy to...
You haven't talked to him about this?
No, but I will do. He lives in London, he's a friend. So I will be able to ask those questions, from somebody about as close as you can get to the...
I mean, doesn't it takes about 2 weeks to prepare a building that size for controlled demolition, right?
Well, it's actually way more than that, but the point taken. It's more than 2 weeks. It's really, really involved.
Obviously, I'll be back to you.
Please,
because this conversation isn't going to stop today.
And I would email him and say, did you check with your expert friends? And he would email me back and pretend I hadn't asked the question.
Really?
You know what I mean? That's the Orwellian thing.
So,
right. You know what it is? As Orwell said it, freedom is the freedom to say that 2 + 2 = 4.
Do you see my logic here, though, that makes no sense?
No, I don't.
And it sounds mundane, but it's actually true. Just 2 + 2 = 4. You can't go from the moon to the earth in tinfoil. You can't do it. Right? And that's all we're asking here.
Freedom is the freedom to say 2 + 2 = 4. If that is granted, all else follows.
And I'm a big fan of Orwell.
Yeah. And why I'm burning up now is I bought his book, and there's a whole chapter in there about me and how I'm nuts. I got it at the library. Thank God I didn't buy it. Wow. And then I'm nuts, you know.
And I'm a big fan of Orwell.
Yeah. So he really believes he's a good guy, you know, and an honest guy and a good journalist with somebody like Nick Rosen, or I don't know, you name whatever journalist you want to name, but a lot of them, though, are full-blown, you know, CIA assets or whatever, Anderson Cooper.
I remember in the wake of Afghanistan back in the 80s when the CIA was handing these out to Mujahideen.
You know, you look into his background and he's just, some of them are just flat out bad guys. Chris Matthews, I'm sure. But the Orwellian crime stop is what Orwell called it, which prevents you from going further with something.
The first and simplest stage in the discipline, which can be taught even to young children, is called, in newspeak, crime stop. Crime stop means the faculty of stopping short, as though by instinct, at the threshold of any dangerous thought.
You're making millions of dollars a year. Yes, you are.
Crime stop, in short, means protective stupidity.
So they know the truth subconsciously, and they avoid the truth because they don't want to face it.
Yeah, because it's a responsibility. You know, they have to do something. This guy's a journalist, Nick Rosen. He's a well-known journalist in England, and he knows that if he goes into the camp of people that doubt what happened on 9/11, because he fancied himself a real investigative journalist.
So we're dealing with different kinds of things. We're dealing with mind control. We're dealing with the subconscious issues that people have. But at another level, there's also, there's a bigger, I don't know if it's a bigger issue.
The system is set up on a surface level, you know, just without the weird mind control aspects of it, to not let people rise above a certain level if they don't go along with the lies. And I got a great personal example of that. Briefly, HBO wanted to do a series based on my last book. You know, I have these books about surfing and about my life. And HBO called me. I didn't call them, and asked about In Search of Captain Zero, this one book that Sean Penn bought, and asked me about its availability to make a series out of it. I said, no, it's been sold, but I have another book, and I sent it to him about my life in Costa Rica as a surfer at this end of the road surf enclave where there's no law. It was surfers and some terrorist kind of Costa Ricans, and it was like the series Deadwood meets The Endless Summer. It's a really, really interesting idea for a series, you know. Anyway, these guys wanted to do it. I had the top director of HBO, this guy who's won Emmys for The Sopranos, and the producer has won these awards. I mean, they wanted to do this series as their next thing. Now, to make a long story short, before we could go in and have a meeting with HBO, which would only be about paying me to write a pilot, which would not be a big deal. They do it all the time. HBO caught wind of my movie and saw chunks of it on the internet. And my movie was, largely about the assassination of John Kennedy.
They've been lying for 50 years, telling us that Oswald did.
I don't know who they. I don't know who they.
Name anybody in the media. And
I don't know. You name. You give me one person who's done it.
Dan Rather.
I led one independent CBS News investigation and was part of 3 others over the years.
Did you think that the shots came from the book depository building?
No, I thought it came from a fence.
I know of no persuasive evidence or testimony.
The gentleman turned around. My dad saw clearly that it was a rifle.
Bring me solid witness testimony.
Most everyone thought it came from the fence.
Solid witness testimony.
It's my understanding the reason I did not go before the Warren Commission was because in my statement that I thought the shots came from directly behind implied the shots were coming from the grassy knoll. This is something apparently the Warren Commission did not want to hear.
The Secret Service agent in charge of Dallas that day.
He thought they were coming from the same place.
Which is?
Behind the fence.
It could be because they don't think it's it could be because they don't think it's newsworthy.
There wouldn't be a bigger story that we could ever write.
And apparently the Warren Commission did not want to hear.
Quality news of integrity in the public service.
We're impressed with the importance of this medium. We shall hope to learn to use it and not to abuse it.
And that permeated the halls of CBS News. You could smell it.
Who controls the past controls the future.
Goebbels, the chief liar of Hitler, he used to say, you have to tell a lie long enough and then always something is going to stick.
Oswald was the lone assassin.
And that is a principle which I have seen here.
There's no credible evidence.
The single bullet theory remains intact.
I just don't know why Dan Rather said what he said.
And I think that the day President Kennedy died was the day that television news, as we now know it, was born.
Maybe asleep yet, Sally?
Not yet, but you will be soon. There'll be no more tears.
This is the contempt that they have for us.
An official version of the assassination, arrived at by men of unimpeachable credentials.
And at that time, HBO was making a deal with Vincent Bugliosi to make a miniseries out of his lying piece of crap that says Oswald did it alone, right?
I found out Vincent Bugliosi was just about to release a book, which is unbelievable. It's a cellular analysis called Reclaiming History. I took this to Tom Hanks' company, Playtone, do these long-form series about American history. John Adams, Band of Brothers, Earth and Moon. And so Tom said, this is our next project.
And so they blacklisted me, right? That I found out from a fan at HBO. That I zero doubt that was what happened. Now my point here is that is a perfect example of in the media, and HBO is as much a part of the media as Chris Matthews and Fox News is.
I mean, I think I'm really the most vocal journalist coming out talking about CNN in CNN's history. And that's because Time Warner owns HBO, CNN, TBS, cable outlets, Time Magazine. And journalists are terrified to come forward and talk about what's going on because they feel they'll never be able to get a job in the business again.
They don't allow you to even get success at writing a series about surfing if you got the wrong attitude about these larger issues.
So you could have had a contract with HBO, but because of some of the other topics you've covered.
Well, you've seen the clips on the internet, right?
Right.
If you could give me a yes or no answer to the question, does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
NSA collects word for word content of every phone call communication, of every email.
Well, they didn't like it. I have a couple on there that are about JFK. He was killed by the CIA, period, and it's obvious. And that's what I'm saying. And they didn't want me being a success or being in their HBO family if I felt like that. So instead of being rich and famous, I'm, me talking to you, which is fine. I enjoy it. No, but I'm telling you that's a little example, and a personal one, of the way it works. People want, well, how could everybody be in on it? Well, it's not like that. They weed out the people that are or aren't already, in a sense, under mind control as they rise up in a media organization. They're bit by bit, you get them down to only the guys that'll say, yeah, of course, Kennedy was killed by Oswald, 9/11, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So it doesn't take the spooky kind of mind control for that to happen, is what I mean.
So what should be happening in our society is that when people should change their view of reality when they find evidence that contradicts their worldview.
How many fingers, Winston?
Does that sound unreasonable, what you just said? But
what they do, unfortunately, is they change their interpretation of the evidence in order to maintain their worldview.
God, you're putting it, and I couldn't put it better myself.
Crime Stop, in short, means protective stupidity.
And that's the problem. That's the problem with what's going on in the world right now. That
is the problem. I mean, if you want to sum it up, because if everybody knew the truth, we'd have no more problems. If we just knew the truth, you wouldn't have to go out and revolt or do whatever. It would take care of itself if everybody just knew the truth. I'm hoping that there's a percentage of people listening to us right now, and it might only be 1% or 1/4%, that will actually get something out of this, and they'll start looking into stuff. That's all I can ask for is, because I've given up on, the vast majority of people.
The truth is so much more fascinating than the lie.
Oh, boy, isn't it? It's like the ultimate detective story.
Do you know that there is a reasonable explanation for everything if you just put your mind to it?
And it's people incredible. Call me insane for looking into this stuff, and I'm going, Acon and Doyle couldn't come up with this stuff. Sherlock couldn't come up with it.
You will not follow my precept. How often have I said to you, once you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth.
Great Scott Holmes, you mean you're going to take on the case? Right.
That's your conclusion.
Yes, it's my conclusion. Let me play, the movie I'm working on. I have a short clip of a guy that I explained all this moon stuff to him, and here was his bottom line reaction. Listen.
I guess that doesn't affect you either, in terms of that those were not taken on the moon. You believe those were taken on the moon?
Yeah.
Where'd the extra light come from?
I have no idea.
Now, that is what photographers call a hot spot. That's a reflection from a light. Okay. There's no place else that could be, and that's supposed to be in shadow. But it doesn't matter. No matter what I show you, they landed on the moon, right?
Yeah.
No matter what.
No matter what.
No matter what. I mean, just picturing the scene. The sun is
I believe that they were on the moon, though.
But no matter what.
No matter what.
No matter what evidence you say.
No matter what.
Yeah. No matter what.
No matter what.
I love that. That's great.
It's like sitting a kid down and telling them that Santa Claus is not real.
It is like that. It's exactly like that. I have to admit.
So there you go. That's your average person.
That's what's so weird about all this, because we're just two regular guys, and we're looking around thinking, why is this not obvious?
Right.
It takes people time. It takes them a little time. It took me some time to come to grips with the fact that everything that you thought you knew is wrong. That's a big change.
Well, you're an unusual person. You have to understand that 99 or whatever % of people will not make that change. That's pretty much the way it is. Do you disagree with me?
I'm hoping that more and more people are starting to turn that corner.
Well, I think what it is we're getting information to that tiny percent, whatever it is, because of the internet and whatever, and because of the time in history that we're living, the tiny percentage of people that are capable of being awake, we're getting to more of them. Now, what percentage that really is, I don't know. I've just really found it's because I've been doing this for 7 years, making a film for 7 years. I've been working and interviewing people, and I've just found it really tiny. I met a few people who already, were pretty much awake.
We're down to 2 minutes, Alan. I can't believe it, man.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell everyone about your website and about the new movie you're working on?
And we'll talk again about it, but my website, banditobooks.com, with a T for Bandito. Essays that you can read from there that I'm interested in your feedback on, and you can see a trailer to the film I'm making. And what you should do is subscribe to my newsletter. I only send it out once in a blue moon, but I'll let you know, if anything important comes up. If you like what I'm talking about, read my books. Go to Amazon and put my name, Weisbecker, Weisbecker, in there. I've written 3 books that.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio.
Here's something that'll crack you up. It's not long. Hold on.
India has put a satellite around the moon. I think the Japanese or the Chinese.
Japanese
Anyway.
have an order.
Okay.
Chinese have one coming.
NASA announced today. Well, let me read the story here. Hold on. No-fly zones will come into effect on the moon for the very first time by the end of this month.
Oh, a lot more worried
A
about
no-fly zone. Yeah. So they're prohibiting people from flying over and imaging the alleged landing sites of the Apollo missions. Okay? That's what's going on.
And they're doing that because, it's not going to be anything like they told us.
Anyway, that's funny. We're actually telling people they can't fly over where we landed on the moon. Can you imagine the balls it takes? Not only to say people can't go there, but the implications of it. What are you, crazy? That's NASA. What more you need? By the way, the guy that's interviewed there, Jay Weidner, Weidner, this is a whole nother level. He has proved to my complete satisfaction that Stanley Kubrick did the moon landing hoax. The proofs are in a video he did called Kubrick's Odyssey, which I highly recommend. It's funny because I had an email exchange with him. He got very angry with me, but it doesn't matter. He's really good. And he will show you that Stanley Kubrick did the moon landings.
The consensus now from space enthusiasts is that excitement is not there anymore. Let me turn to you, Captain, being the 4th man to walk on the moon on Apollo 12. How do we get that excitement back?
Well, I think it's mostly up to the media. It's my observation that what the media talks about and says is exciting is what the public thinks is exciting.
And explore the moon and develop the moon. We should go boldly where man has not gone before. Where man has not gone before. And explore the moon where man has not gone before.
There are great ideas undiscovered, breakthroughs available to those who can remove one of truth's protective layers. Can remove one of truth's protective layers.
What I hope the people listening will do is not believe me, but do your own research. Go look into it.
The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command.
Because if everybody knew the truth, we'd have no more problems. If we just knew the truth, you wouldn't have to go out and revolt or do whatever. It would take care of itself if everybody just knew the truth.
I don't have to show you any stinking watches.